Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, this gentleman that we're about to interview has been on here not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the reason why he's coming on today, he's got a brand new book, or as I would say, manifesto on personal branding. I've already read it once. I'm on my second iteration, and we're going to be talking all about it. His book is called Personal Branding, a manifesto on fame and influence. So guys, if you want to build your personal brand, this is your episode. Isaac, my brother, welcome to the show.
Richard, honored to be here, brother, and dive in about this. I have my copy to my left too. And man, it's just so cool to see this come to fruition. So let's hop in.
I love it. And there it is, guys. I ain't BSing. I got it. I bought my copy, just so you know, it's nothing for free. And if you want to learn something, sometimes you got to invest in yourself. So Isaac, first question right off the get. What is your definition of resiliency?
Of resiliency, it's tenacity. I would say tenacity and resiliency are the same thing in many meanings of the word from a semantic standpoint. It's about going through periods of struggle and not throwing in the towel. And I'm thinking about even as I was writing my book, and I thought I had everything perfect. And then I went through and read it again and I edited it again. I thought I would have it ready by a certain date, and then I had to keep going. And I knew that I had that goal in mind and that I had to achieve it. And I might have had to push back the deadline, but I was still resilient enough to say, all right, I'm not going to let that basically impede on my way of progressing forward and actually bringing this out to the world. And now that I'm done with the book and getting back into consulting, I'm kind of realizing how much obsession I had over the writing process and over the book. So I feel like resiliency is just tenacity. It's, pushing forward despite of challenges, in as least of a cliche way as possible.
Now, this isn't your first book. You could have just quit the first time, but now you wanted to add some more things, add some more food to the stew and stir the pot a little bit. So there's a big difference between your first iteration and your second iteration. Why didn't you just quit at the first iteration?
Well, if I'm speaking openly and honestly and with full transparency, it's because the first one I wasn't proud of. I thought that I was going to publish that one work and it would say everything I wanted to say. And then I could go about writing other things and continue in life and business and, continuing to hone in on my skills from a personal branding standpoint and being able to help clients. But when I got my first copy and I was happy with it, but at the same point, I felt like it could have been better. And it wasn't that I was trying to rush it, but I realized with the first edition, I was almost trying to fabricate the length because I didn't have enough to say. And let's go ahead and talk about this. I mean, I published that book when I was 21. It came out in November of 2021. It was still great. I mean, it was kind of the first little glimpse into what eventually evolved into my philosophy of personal branding. So it was kind of a statement, but it wasn't really the identity. And the second edition of my book is more about establishing the actual identity and bringing the core concepts. And I mean, you've read both editions. The second one is night and day. It's 10 times the length. It's more than, it's right around 65,000 words. I would say pure text, it's around 64,000 outside of testimonials and all that fine print crap. But the first edition was less than 7. And so it's 10 times the word count, 376 pages. And even if I lowered the font, it still would have been over 300 pages. So it's something that in order to have peace of mind for myself and not think back 10 years from now and be like, man, what was that piece of crap I published? And I'm not saying that it was crap because it did help people, but in my brain and in my mind, I knew that I had more to offer. And that's why I sat down, and over the past 3 years, I've been working on the second edition in bit by bit pieces, from coming up with some ideas of titles. And I was biking a couple years ago over the summer. I would have an idea. I'd stop my bike. I'd pull out my phone and I'd jot down a really quick note. And it was at the beginning of last year that I got really serious about actually putting it together, formulating it, and then eventually publishing it this year.
Well, something that I got from this book that made me really think is, being a man of God, I read my Bible every day, and I really never thought of Jesus as having a personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
So, every time you see somebody with a cross, I'm like, that's Jesus. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But personal branding, you even said it in the book, in the beginning of the book, it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
This is nothing new. It's not something, even the first 10 or 15 years lately, people have been talking about personal branding, but in reality, it's nothing new, correct?
That is what is entirely unique. There were other books that I didn't read any books really all of 2024. And as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, that's like a no-go. You always read books, right? But I purposely ran away from them because I didn't want to be influenced by other texts. So I had influence by Robert Cialdini. I had 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. I didn't read any of them. I wanted to. They're sitting over here by my chair now because I'm going to start going through them. But there are multiple books that say a lot of what I said in terms of building relationships, relationship capital, the reputation management side of things. But what sets my book apart and sets what I'm doing apart, especially with other people in the personal branding space, like Dory Clark has a wonderful book that's out that I need to pick up. And I saw it the other day in a bookstore, and it has some similarities there. And I'm thinking, this is a Harvard professor. That's pretty cool. And I've never read it before. So we're on the same train of thought. But where my book stands out is I'm positioning personal branding as a part of human existence. It's really, as I've been talking to several people, I've realized that personal branding is more so a result of intelligence. It's a result of intelligent life, because if there was an alien race that were on par with our level of intelligence, they would have a personal brand. You think about Star Wars and Chewbacca. Chewbacca had a personal brand within the Star Wars universe, but he wasn't human. So I'm really putting it into a field that is so much larger than just social media and the internet. I'm making it a part of our entire civilization and entire being. And whether or not you believe in Adam and Eve, if you're religious or not, the first two people, man and woman, who got up and walked and fathered billions of children, they had a personal brand. So it all started somewhere. And throughout history, different people who we study today, which I mentioned several in the book, like Hammurabi, Cleopatra, Adolf Hitler, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Gandhi, just to name a few of them, they have all had personal brands. And whether they do good or bad or evil, which is up for your interpretation, they achieve that level of success and impact, again, positively or negatively, because of their personal brand, because of their character, because of who they were.
But something you also said in your book is you build your personal brand every day.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you do, whatever you say, however you act, that's building your personal brand. Like, I grew up in New Jersey in a big Italian household. And if somebody walked down the street and they said, hey, he's one of us, he's a good fella, mm-hmm. You knew exactly what he was. You knew exactly how he walked, how he talked, because of what he did every day. But just because if I said he's a good fella, well, then his personal brand is growing with the people that I know. So isn't it what you do every day, how you act, how you speak, that you are building your personal brand on a daily?
Yes, it is those small interactions right there. Or I mentioned going into, let's say Starbucks, and I did very good in my book to make sure that it avoided the limitations of our current time. Whether Starbucks is around 100 years from now or not, it doesn't matter, because the principles of the book are the same. So I didn't mention LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I didn't mention any of the platforms that we're using and leveraging today once in the entire book. But I did mention how if you were to go into your local coffee shop every morning and have a conversation with the barista, you are engaging in a form of marketing and building that relationship with that barista. I remember there was a coffee shop here. I used to go into Panera Bread religiously. I had the Unlimited Sips Club. I'd go in with my laptop. I'd sit down, get some work done, have unlimited coffee, which was awesome. And I knew every single employee by name, and they knew me. I was building my personal brand. Now, what did that relationship translate to? Well, nothing. Really, I didn't really take any of those relationships to social media. It's not like they're going to be clients, but that is still a part of building my personal brand. And so now, let's say a couple of years from now, I decide to go and run for a local political office in Little Rock, or I'm putting billboards around the city. You never know. Those people that I used to go and sit down and, drink coffee in their establishment could see me and be like, wow, I remember he used to come in all the time. And so it builds that recognition. And so it doesn't matter if you're on social media, you're trying to go famous and, have millions of people who follow you, or you just want to be the local hero, as I mentioned in the hierarchy of personal branding. It is all relevant. And more importantly, the mindset and the mentality that you develop through thinking about your personal brand in this light is entirely unique from just creating content and being on social media.
Okay, now I want to get into this because this probably, I love your whole book, but this kind of really got me thinking that there's a difference between being famous and being influential.
Yes.
And you were talking about a young lady that was famous, but then she decided to start her own design wear company. She couldn't sell 4 dozen shirts, even though she had millions of followers.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between being famous and actually being influential, correct?
Yes. I use the analogy of a fire, and, I say that people are kind of the oxygen to what you're doing. The idea that you have is the fuel. And then I say that you are the heat. That influence is heat to the fire. You need all three. You need heat, oxygen, and fuel in order to build a fire. And I say that if you can leverage your personal brand and develop influence through other people who are actually getting something from you, they're following you for a reason, whether that be education, motivation, connection, or entertainment, you're able to have an impact on their life and influence them to do something, think something, feel something, learn something. And so that story of the influencer that I mentioned in my book, I didn't mention her by name, but a couple years ago, she had over 1 million followers on Instagram. She launched the apparel line and she wasn't able to sell out. And now if you were to think about a large scale influential person who had 1 million followers, like let's say Charlie Kirk on the conservative side, or Candace Owens on the conservative side, or any of the comedians like Matt Rife, any of them are able to make a post and they will instantly be able to sell out because they have influence. They are delivering something. Whereas in the case of the influencer, if you're just posting bikini shots, or if you're a male and you're posting pictures of your abs, what are you doing for the audience outside of sexual gratification? And that was a big part of what I wanted to talk about in the book. And so you can have all of the fame, but if you don't have the influence to actually be able to get a certain results, it is useless. And that's why the book's title is A Manifesto on Fame and Influence, because there's a dichotomy there. And in the law of personal branding that I talk about, I say that you have to have both in order to actually get a positive result. Now, if you can have 1 million followers who know you, i.e. you have fame, and then you have influence over them, now you have 1 million people who are your advocates, who can go out and market for you, who can talk about you, who can share you, who can edify you. And so really, Richard, this book is the #1 text that covers everything that I've ever learned about in terms of personal branding, and just all the different nuances that people don't realize exist when it comes to their individual reputation.
Well, something you also talk about a lot is, a lot of people when they're on social media or in general, everything is shown in the best light. And it's always having the best filters. But I've seen people like Matt Rife. I'm actually trying to get tickets to go see him at Madison Square Garden. A little while ago, he was trying to be canceled. And he put a post out there and he's like, guys, I'm not perfect. I'm a comedian. I have bad days. And he didn't try to sugarcoat everything. Mm-hmm. So I believe that people that follow people like myself and you, they know that we're real people. We feel and we're not above everybody else. So how important is that in building your brand to let people know that you're human?
It's vastly important because people don't want to follow perfect people, because it gives them this sense that it's unattainable, that the halo effect is there, that it's like they're somehow better than they are. And that's simply not the case. They wake up, they have their routines, they're traveling. Yes, their career and their successes are contributing to their broader recognition, and their accomplishments are going to continue growing because they have that fame and they have that precedence of influence. But that I suppose honesty, that transparency, I think a better example I could give is the person who's starting out on social media who's not the expert. When I started out, in 2017, I didn't know anything about business. I was arrogant, I was young, I was fueled, I was on fire, and I was lost, frankly. And as I've learned my skills, as I've decided what I wanted to pursue, as I've started to accumulate knowledge and do things like publish my book, people continued to follow me and they saw my evolution. And I was very open and I said, hey, this venture didn't work out. I just couldn't see myself doing this long term. I've talked about how I've moved from the music industry time and time again, and went from one business to another business to another business, and then eventually Mashman Consulting Group. And that perfection is not what people want to see. They don't want to see the Lamborghinis. But if the person who has the Lamborghini, right, the business guru, and actually talks about how they were able to achieve it, not in a way of boasting. I think that just posting your Rolls Royce or your Lamborghini is very one-sided because there's no value outside of motivation. But if you're able to educate people about how you were able to actually achieve it, not bragging, not being some narcissist and saying I'm better than you, you can teach them, you can inspire them, you can connect with them and talk about how you started from the dirt, you started from, the ground up, and you're able to just fragment and can combine and consolidate every single aspect of your journey and of your life and publicize that. And your personal brand, I think, before we even jump into this and go any further, we need to define what your personal brand is. And your personal brand is you. It is who you are, your characteristics, your skin color, the clothes that you wear, your interests, your passions, your hobbies, your interests, which I just said twice, your professional career, everything. Every single thing about you makes up your personal brand. And I think that's really a cool thing to think about, because most people, they might only talk about their business online, and I don't know who you are as a man. I don't know who you are as a woman. Are you interested in something? Are you a mother? Like, what can I do to build rapport with you? I don't know. But if you can set those little rapport pieces in public, you're at a tremendous advantage.
And that's something that I agree with you and Russell Brunson about is, you can't just be posting business. Because like you said, people know me. They know I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a veteran. I have more than just business. And people, I don't think if they see just business, eventually it just scroll, yeah. Right? Because they don't feel connected. There's no connection. So but like you also said in your book, the way you were raised, the way your parents raised you is a part of your personal brand. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have to be your whole personal brand. You make the choice of what your personal brand is.
Yes.
So talk to us about, because a lot of people say, I was raised this way. I was raised a Democrat or a Republican or whatever. I was raised not a Christian, but now I want to be a Christian, but I was brought up this way, so I feel like I got to stay this way.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
That's really about evolution and adapting, and you have the full capacity and free will to change and decide what you want to be known as, what you want to be known for, what you want to believe in, what you choose not to believe in. There are things that, even though I might have been raised in more of a conservative household, I tend to be more in the middle and centered right now in terms of my own beliefs. I had an evolution after I graduated high school and after I left home, and I saw different points of view and I took everything into consideration. And I've also made the decision on what I want to talk about. I don't talk about politics often. I don't talk about religion often. I'm not agnostic to it. I'm not somebody who will not talk about it, but it's not a huge piece of my personal brand that I would like to discuss. Whereas you, being a veteran, you could talk about some of the issues that veterans have coming back home. You can talk about PTSD. You can talk about the lack of camaraderie that people face whenever they, leave the military service and they try to find that community once again. So it's really a give and a take, and you have the full capacity to determine, okay, maybe I do want to become a commentator on something, or maybe you want to align your business to be, pro-America, or you want to make posts, but again, you don't want to do things without purpose. And I talk about in a subchapter, Controversy with Purpose, and about how you can lean on some of the things that are going on right now in society and talk about them, but what is the intention behind it? What is the end goal? And a lot of times people just make these blanketed statements and it doesn't do anything positive for their personal brand. And so I say that being intentional with what you're posting, what you choose not to post, is paramount. And that also goes to what you want to talk about in, face-to-face interactions. But again, I think that is just something that is up to the individual. And you can easily pivot time and time again. And I do mention that in the book as well, underneath the subchapter pivot or pivoting, because some people feel like they're trapped in their career or they're trapped in their business because they're afraid of what people will think of them for, or they think that by pivoting into a new business that they actually really want to build, that they'll lose all of the support. But a big piece of building your personal brand and actually talking about who you are as an individual is it gives you the flexibility to make those pivots that are strategic for you, because people are connected with you for Richard Kaufman or for Isaac Mashman rather than just the professional, what they can get from you.
And like you said, sometimes you have to think, like a lot of times I'll be about to reply on something on social media and I'm like, backspace, delete. Because, a lot of times even my wife says it. She's like, you're a public figure. You can't just be spouting off on BS without alienating 50% of people that follow you. But it's not only that. I think a lot of people just like to be controversial to be controversial.
Yeah.
A lot of people just, I'm one way, whether it's the right or the left. But I think you have to stand for something. But I think it's the way you stand for things. Exactly. Like, even I was reading my Bible this morning. I'm getting into the part about Easter. Even Jesus at one point, he had to go in the church and start flipping tables. Mm-hmm. And he had to get a whip out and start whipping some people. But he was also the same guy that would hug the children. He would hold the lamb. So I think sometimes it's the way you come about things, the way you talk to people is, I think, the way your personal brand is. Like, people know I'm pro God, I'm pro guns, and I'm pro life. Yeah. But I'm also very caring and empathetic to the other side. And so I think part of being a personal brand, I think you have to be able to, even now more days, is be a little bit more caring and a little bit more empathetic. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? As far as, you may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's okay to sit around and have a cup of tea with everybody.
I think it's a tremendous advantage. And if you can be the person who is able to approach those delicate conversations with nuance and with facts or with certain points of view that are not berating the other person, you can believe and stand for something entirely different than the other person. But they know that they can still talk to you and they can still work with you for your business. They can still support you. And it's the line in the sand moments of I am against you that you should absolutely and holistically avoid.
All right. So let's dig deeper into the book. What is I can't remember word for word, so I'm not going to say it. What is your definition of personal branding? You wrote it in the book. I just can't remember it offhand.
Well, your personal brand is you. It is who you are. Just like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, and I have my book right here. So let me just pull up real quick the Law of Success, or not the Law of Success. My brain is on 1,000 different things. I was recording a video on that earlier. 2.4, the Law of Personal Branding. It's going to be on page 79. Let me go ahead and just read this off real quick. And I create 4 different laws in the book. I pinpoint them down. The law of familiarity, the law of connection, the law of personal branding, and the law of fame and influence. And so the law of personal branding is a personal brand can only be created with the introduction of new life. A personal brand cannot be destroyed regardless of the death of the person it belongs to. A personal brand can, however, be forgotten. And what's really cool about this is it is really a consolidation of a bunch of different beliefs. And this is a perfect representation of personal branding being something that has always been a part of intelligent man. And every single person who has ever walked the face of this earth has had a personal brand. But the anonymous Mesopotamian farmer from 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, they might not have been a social media star because social media, wasn't around. So it's relative to what is available in their times. But I use the story of, let's say you used to be a medieval blacksmith or a medieval baker of bread, right? And that's actually how the last name Smith came about. It came from one of the Old English words, which meant to bake. And I say that the baker who used to feed, hundreds of people for their local township, they were known as the local baker. Hey, if you needed something, go to that person, right? But on the other side of that, on the inverse, you had kings of England who ruled off of divine right and saying that they were handed that crown and that position of authority by God. And they leveraged their personal brand to conquer kingdoms and to rule. And some kings, we look back on history, and some of them were fat and greedy and lustful, and some kings were great. And I talk about the story of even King David and, being able to kill Goliath. And I talk about how King David's reputation was established the moment that he killed Goliath, and Goliath's reputation was tarnished. And I think that's such an interesting, story and analogy to even break down, because a lot of times we look at that and it's a story of resiliency. David, who had no chance to kill this giant who killed thousands of soldiers and thousands of Israelites back in the biblical corpus and the biblical theology, he had no reason to believe that he was going to be able to kill him, but he did. And that is a story that now, thousands of years later, we still tell and we talk about as, hey, maybe you're taking on a big insurmountable challenge, but you can still do that. Think about the story of David and Goliath, right? And I don't think anybody's broken it down from a standpoint of reputation and thinking about what actually went into that and how scared, if David didn't have faith, he would have been, because any normal soldier would have ran the opposite direction of Goliath, right? But Goliath's reputation spoke for him, and it did the speaking for him.
And and I think it's amazing that we're talking about this today. Is this yesterday morning, as I'm doing my cardio, I listened to Joel Osteen, and that's what he talked about. He was talking about how just the day before, David was in a field somewhere. Mm-hmm. The day after, people were saying, "Mr. David, can I get you anything? How are you doing, sir?" So his reputation was built on that his heart, first of all, but on that one act. And after he was known as King David, but because if he didn't do that one act, he wouldn't have been known as King David. But mm-hmm. How you can change in an instant. Your life can change in an instant. You don't have to be what you think you were, but you can always adapt. And like you said in the book, you can always pivot and become the person that you want to be, or become the influencer that you want to be, right?
Yeah, and it boils down to making that decision and then positioning yourself as that public figure, and then taking those steps via marketing and managing your reputation and being edified and getting on interviews such as your show and your platform, which I'm grateful for, and doing things where you can expand the awareness that is surrounding your name. And then eventually you'll develop a group of advocates and a group of people who want to recommend you. They want to refer you. They want to send business your way. They want to support whatever you have going on. And that is a tremendous competitive advantage in my brain, especially in the modern age, in the 21st century, where we have all of these businesses and competitors. How would the small business ever stand against the Amazons of the world? Or how would the small mom and pop restaurant be able to take on the larger chain restaurants? And the reason, or what they can do, is they can build out their personal brand as, hey, this is Mama Mia's Pizza Shop, and Grandma, Ruth, started this establishment in the 1920s. Think about growing up in, I believe you said New Jersey. Think about all of the different local restaurants that were around you, and you probably knew the stories of the family. Yeah. You knew how they got started. They were in the neighborhood for decades, right? And if you can use your personal brand, speaking to business owners now or entrepreneurs, to grow your business, you're going to be able to have a better chance of succeeding and surviving in the years to come compared to the business that doesn't have a face and that only has a logo. But now you have a person who can champion it forward and who can be the big voice for it. And that doesn't cost you anything. And that's another reason why I believe that everybody should, if they have a personal brand and they start as the unconscious incompetent, they don't even know that personal branding exists or it's something to, take advantage of. But if you can move from the unconscious incompetent to somebody who actually starts to leverage it and get results from it, you're going to be ahead of the curve. And I mean, it's not something new. Framing it in this light is new, but it's something that Gary Vaynerchuk has been talking about social media for years. And I don't follow his content. I know that you've had the opportunity to meet him, and he gave you some advice. We talked about that the last time I was on the show. But he's been talking about social media and just putting out a post. But really, what is behind that post? And that's where the storytelling, the art of storytelling and actually communicating an intent or getting a result for the other person on the other end of the screen, that's when we can break down the complexity of the relationship and how they would view you and why they would want to even view you as a public figure, and validating your own claims as being an expert.
So, okay, now this is the teaching podcast. So a lot of the people that listen to this are veterans, just getting out of the military. Where in the military, there is no branding. There's no personal. The only thing you have is your name and your rank.
Yeah.
And then when you hit the streets in civilian world, you have to reimagine and reinvent your life. So what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for somebody that's getting out of the military and wants to start their own personal brand?
Well, you're not starting your personal brand. You're starting to leverage it. That's a big distinction to make there. Okay. And if we were to think about the military, I know we're diving deep on subjects today, and we're going into, we're taking a very detailed approach, which I really appreciate. If you think about how the military is structured, you do have the ranks. You have lieutenant, sergeant, private, major, generals, right? All of these different ranks, which is not really about status in so much as it is about accomplishments and respect. And the reason those people were able to get promoted and move up the ranks is because they were able to accomplish something within their military career. And so they did have a personal brand, and because of what they were able to accomplish and achieve for this country, or for any country for that matter, if you're thinking about the different militaries throughout the world, it really is a testament of what they were able to do and what vision they were able to forecast, how they were able to bring everybody together. So I think that's really something that we could talk about in detail another time. But thinking about the veteran who is getting out of the military service, realize that you have already had a huge credibility boost, frankly. And so whether you want to be a public speaker, whether you want to launch a brand new business, this is when you can use a title to your advantage, which I talk about, how a doctor is able to always get respect because they went to school to become a doctor, right? They have the PhD. Or the lawyer who passed the bar exam, they have a title that they can use to their advantage. Now, you as a veteran, you can use the title of veteran to your advantage. And this isn't a way of you trying to get results that are not deserved. You serve the country, so why don't you actually take advantage and leverage that? If you want to start a local landscaping company, if you want to start a local law firm, if you want to even start an internet business, you can say veteran-owned business. And you could talk about how the different experiences from your military career have helped you become a professional in your new business, or some of the skills. Like, let's say you were a mechanic in the military and you worked on the big different vehicles. And let's say you want to start a mechanic shop. You can say, I used to work on rigs that were 100 times the size of your car. I'm pretty sure I can help you with your car, right? So it's like understanding that all of your previous accomplishments are going to be your advantage today. And by taking advantage of the title of veteran or being in the military and serving, that's going to make people want to support you that much more. Because I do believe that America, we're entering into the next patriotic era, and people are going to want to support American businesses. They're going to want to support veterans. So that's something that I would say. The other thing would be to definitely get on social media, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. I think that social media is something that everybody should be online and be creating content, but some people, especially veterans, might not want to be, right? They might want to just go and have those face-to-face interactions. So if you recognize that maybe you don't want to be on social media, I'm not going to argue that fact for you. My grandfather was a carpenter. He hated people being in his business. He liked his privacy. So I can understand it. But I think being on social media is something that you should absolutely do, like you have, Richard, and you got out of the service, you got into your career, and now you're online and you're having a podcast with millions of downloads. You made that decision because you realized what good you could do with it, what good you could do with the platform. And so creating content online, whether that be a short video and just creating a social media platform for your name. And, for example, getting your social media handle at Richard Kaufman or at Isaac Mashman is just a really simple tip. And I talk about that in the book, Creating a Seamless Brand. And the final thing that I will say is just have more conversations and build more relationships. And people you'll come to find, especially as a veteran, would be interested in listening to you. And that's where that credibility comes into play, because you are going to be somebody that people automatically want to support.
And something I want to talk about is, even if you're in the middle of a career, sometimes it's okay to make a little pivot. You don't have to make big pivots, but sometimes you could just make a little pivot. Like at one point recently, I thought I had to be on all the social media channels.
Yeah. Instead
of dominating the two that I'm biggest on, which is Facebook and LinkedIn. But I think a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out, they try to be everywhere. They try to be everything to everybody. And I think it was Jim Rohn that said, if you're marketing to everybody, you're marketing to nobody. So what are your thoughts on, starting narrow and then eventually going wide? Or do you suggest going wide and then eventually going narrow?
I suggest starting wide, but not with the intention of trying to go viral or become famous on every single platform. That's not what I'm encouraging anybody to do. But I would say that if you are creating content and you're taking the time to do that and to record videos, to have conversations, to take photos, to come up with, still posts or to write awesome articles, you might as well take advantage of the different platforms and their exposure and their algorithms. And so you could be on Facebook, Instagram, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. And what you could do is just take that post and just post it across all of those channels. Take advantage of that. That doesn't mean that you're going to spend the same amount of time on every single platform. I spend a tremendous amount of time on Facebook and not so much on Instagram, but I also post every video on Instagram to at least show that I'm active. And that gives me somewhat of a platform that I can leverage if I choose to, as you said, pivot and put more emphasis on growing that platform. But I would definitely say it's wise to start wide. And the reason why is if one of the platforms that you're biggest on disappears tomorrow, think about TikTok and all of the people who are huge on TikTok. They started having conversations about TikTok getting banned, right? And it still might get banned if it's not purchased. All of these influencers who have millions of people there, they were scrambling around because their source of revenue was going out of the window. But now imagine you have the TikTok star that takes their content. I'm thinking of one, Sean Does Magic. He built a platform of over 20 million on TikTok. And then he started to take his content and he posted it on YouTube. He grew an audience on YouTube. And then he also took that content and posted it on Instagram. And so he took advantage of the content and he took the extra minute or 2 minutes every day to diversify that content. And the reason we even are talking about social media with so much detail is frankly because it is one of the biggest and the biggest vehicle from a marketing standpoint that is made available today in 2025, and it costs absolutely nothing. And so I would say go wide, and then you can narrow down where you want to spend the most time. But you should diversify your content just to give you a little bit more security and peace of mind.
And I totally agree with you 100%. Brother, I'm so grateful that we get a chance to talk today. So I just want to say thank you first of all. But
honors all mine, brother.
But, let's talk about the power of proximity.
Okay.
I'm supposed to be speaking at a Richard Branson event at the end of the summer. But if I didn't interview 5 out of the 6 people that were on the stage, I would not be on that stage. But it's because I built relationships. Like we built relationships. I think we've been friends for 7 or 8 years now. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't be talking again today if it wasn't for the relationships that we built. But somebody hooked us up. Somebody, helped us become friends. And I believe in the power of the 5. I believe that, you are the average of the 5 people that you associate with the most. So talk about the power of proximity, especially in building a personal brand. Because if I know that if I'm hanging out with 5 guys at a titty bar and you're all getting divorced, I'm going to be number 6.
Yeah.
But if I'm hanging out with 5 guys, they're talking about business, they're talking about success, they're talking about their kids and their wives. If they're becoming millionaires, the 5 are going to be millionaires. Guess who's going to be number 6? Mm-hmm. So talk about proximity, and you are who you associate with.
Well, we can talk about that as credibility by association and building yourself up. We can also talk about that by guilty by association from a reputational standpoint. And let's think about every time you take a photo with somebody, and I know this might be a little bit of an aggressive thing to mention, but think about Elon Musk taking a photo with Ghislaine Maxwell, right? The associate of Jeffrey Epstein. He still gets flack, even though he's publicly said that he had nothing to do. It was just a photo that was in passing. That still is affecting his personal brand and how certain people are perceiving him. And so that is an example of guilty by association, whether or not he was associated with them at all, just because he was in the same photo. It's also with who you're hanging out with. If you're hanging around somebody who's a known scammer or somebody who, bought their following down in Miami and, you're living that life, that large life, and it comes to be found out that one of the persons or people that you're associating with is less than genuine, how is that going to affect how you are perceived, even if you're doing every single thing right and you are genuinely a good person with morals and ethics, right? And so hanging around experts, mentors, people that, are doing something and have done something notable and that are pushing the, civilization forward. One of the biggest lessons that I took when it came to making money was that if you want to make more money, you help more people, right? You expand and you get into more people, you have greater impact. And that's really about having influence on a day-to-day, a day-to-day scale, whether that be the person who is printing my book, right? They had an impact on me, right? The business owner there, and now they're the number one, the number one business for, self-published authors. But I think associating with great people, and I use Richard Branson in my book. I mentioned, some of his corporate stunts. I went into detail about that a little bit. Will tremendously boost your own credibility because it means that you are valuable enough and you've done something noteworthy enough to even be sharing the stage with him. And every other speaker that is also on stage is also going to be contributing to your authority. And eventually, the inverse is also true to where you could be the person who is helping another person get a leg up because people and your audience will also be curious to know who you're associating with. And so you can actually benefit from this and you can help other people benefit from your own success and your own credibility and your own authority. So I think from a reputation standpoint, it's really a wise thing. And that's not even talking about the mindset and the connections and the relationships and what you can learn from those people. So it's really just a win-win situation across the board.
But I think social proof is so important. Like, when John Lee Dumas actually wrote the whole back cover of my book, or when Dean Graziosi shouts me out, I can say I'm the greatest since sliced bread. But if somebody like Dean Graziosi or John Lee Dumas says, you need to listen to this guy, then it's more important than me shouting it on top of the rooftops. So how important is actual social proof in building a personal brand?
It's everything. Because I could call myself a personal branding expert. I could say that, and like you said, shout it from the rooftops, shout it from the balcony of my office for the entire city of Little Rock to hear. But that is biased, is it not? Oh, I'm the best. Okay. What have you done that validates that claim? But if you can have other people talking about you, talking about how you've been able to impact their life or what they've seen or what they've witnessed, those firsthand accounts are unbiased and it's edification. And what edification is another person saying, this is somebody that you should support. You think about how a salesman operates, right? You have, and I say in the book, the car salesman who's on the lot trying to sell a car. And let's say their manager comes up and is in passing and says, hey, if you're looking for somebody to help you get into the car of your dreams, this salesman, John, right here, he is the number one person you need to work with. The manager edified the salesperson, therefore giving more confidence to the person who is looking to purchase a car. It gives them confidence. It gives them trust. It gives them peace. There's a reason why in the front of my book, I got different quotes from different people in my life. One was my best friend, Kevin. One was the co-founder of my high school and middle school. One was from Tristan T. Roberts, who is the audio engineer behind some of Jelly Roll's earlier works and is gold and platinum certified. I mentioned that. One is from Jeff Weemhoff, the president of Atlantic Awasa. One is from my good friend, Adrian Boisel.
Yep.
Those are all examples of edification that if somebody was to pick up the book and the first page they see is quotes, and this is what you see in every good book, quotes about the person, quotes about the author and what they've what they think about them, it creates more confidence in the person who's reading it for the first time, even though they might not know who I am. They could have picked up my book based off a recommendation or being on your show. But that edification gives them that sense and peace of mind. And it also will allow more opportunities to come to you, because people who are looking for public speakers or looking for veteran speakers or looking for veterans to hire or work with, they want to see positive results. They want to have full faith that they are going to be able to deliver on the promises that they're making. And that is where edification comes in. And that's where credibility comes in, because it shows that you are able to keep your promises from a public point of view.
And if it wasn't for being friends with you, I would have never had Adrian come on the show, and I wouldn't have a relationship with Adrian, is because of the relationship I have with you. So it all goes back to that building relationships.
Yes.
So talk to us about, because I told you before we got on the show, my book is called The Podcast Blueprint. I'm using your book as my blueprint to help 30 million veterans and first responders find their mission in life. So is that the way you meant this book, to not just read it and put it down, but to actually use it for a blueprint for success?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm honored that you even view it in that light, brother. Let's break down the depth of the book, right? The first edition we already distinguished was night and day compared to this edition. This one is just, it's immeasurably better. But there are 8 main chapters that, kind of set the backbone, the framework, and it's also chronological. You need to start with education before you can get into the 4 laws of personal branding. Then you need to go and understand those 4 laws to get into the mindset required to build. Then you need to understand branding, and then understanding how you can build your reputation, and then how you can market yourself and market your personal brand, the personal skills needed to increase it and to have more impactful relationships, and then how to sustain it, which sustainability is the final chapter. And there are 78 subchapters. And at the end of every subchapter, what are there? There are exercises. And then, if you've also noticed in the book, there are reference points. So it's almost like a textbook at the same point, because I reference, if I mention the power of 3, which I believe is 6.3 off the top of my head, I will say in brackets, power of 3, 6.3. So you can go back to that exact subchapter and reference and see how it connects to the subchapter, which might be towards the end of the book or even at the very beginning. And those exercises, there are over 75 of them, questions, tasks, and applications, are meant for you to be very introspective and to reflect, because the book at the core is philosophical. The book is about the philosophy of personal branding, and then there's strategy on top of that. And I want people to use my book as the thing that completely changes their perspective on personal branding. And then they can start looking for ways in their day-to-day life that they can leverage their personal brand to achieve those goals, or, like you said, reach 30 million veterans.
But, I also think that if I was, if I was a young man again, I would want this course taught in colleges.
No.
I would think this book would be a great course, a great college course, because anywhere you go in life, it's about personal branding. Whether it's in the corporate world, whether it's in your personal life, everything is personal branding. So I think this would be a perfect college course. Have you ever thought about that yet?
Yes. And I do mention in the book several times about how the student who graduates from college is going to want to maybe start creating content about their prospective career. They want to get endorsements from their professors. They want to engage in extracurriculars. They want to do things that would give them credibility, right? And credibility is trust, enabling them to land a better paying job. And even though it's not explicitly mentioned as the term personal branding, because the term is relatively new, it was coined in 1997 by a business management consultant, Tom Peters, in an article he wrote for Fast Company. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich actually talked about how if you were to get and collect a portfolio, a nice leather-bound portfolio with all of your accolades and what you can do for a company, you would be much more likely to land the job that you actually want to land and be able to demand a higher salary. And I say demand deliberately, a higher salary, because there is a promise with hiring you. And I think the college student who understands that personal branding is paramount to landing that job, they could go on LinkedIn tomorrow and connect with the CEO of the company they want to get hired at and just send a really quick message and say, hey, it's my hope one day to maybe get hired at your company. Just wanted to reach out, love what you've built. That's all it needs to be. And they could get and cut the line in front of potentially thousands of other people and go straight to the decision maker because of their personal brand. And that is where the business owner mentality, the entrepreneurial thinking, is hugely impactful for not just the businessman, but the entrepreneur, the employee, the independent contractor who's working for a company, everybody.
I love it. So tell us where we can find the book and tell us what's going on in the world of Isaac Mashman.
I appreciate that, brother. And I know you're on a little bit of a time schedule, so I'll try to be very quick. You can purchase your copy of Personal Branding, a Manifesto on Fame and Influence, the second edition. I would recommend purchasing it from Amazon. It's also available in hardcover. The hardcover is $32.99 and the paperback is $21.99. Just make sure if you do order it from Amazon to order it directly through Amazon, not a third party that's going to try to upcharge, the rate and the cost. It's also available on Barnes & Noble and Walmart if you prefer those platforms as well. And I'm working on maybe some local bookstores and maybe a physical, Barnes & Noble distribution. I have to look into that a little bit more, but it's been an absolute pleasure, brother. And as for me and what I'm doing now, I'm jumping back into Mashman Consulting Group and working to build that as, the #1 personal brand consultancy by the year 2035. And although I said 500 consultants, I was talking with my up and coming COO, and I'm thinking we're going to narrow that a little bit more, right? Thinking about going wide and narrowing, and focus on some really good quality hires in the next couple of years and continuing to spread the philosophy of personal branding.
I love it, brother. And I love everything you got going on. I would love to have you come back and do a part 2, because I want to, as I get into my second iteration of the book, I'm sure I'm going to have so many more questions. I would love to come back and do a part 2.
I would be honored. You already know I'm game for that.
I love it, guys. So make sure, guys, I got it right here. Guys, make sure you pick it up. I got it. I love the big fingerprint, by the way. It's one of my favorite parts. I just have to shout out my designer for that, Alexander Stevens. He knocked it out of the park, man. And I told him, I was like, I want your name on the back cover of the book. Say that you designed this, you deserve it. And he really exceeded my expectations. He's one of the best designers I've ever met. But warning, guys, if you do buy the book, make sure you have a pen and you have a marker with you, because you're going to want to mark and outline. My book is already marked and outlined already, all different colors. So make sure, if you want to build a personal brand, this is the manifesto that you need. Brother Isaac, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you and your friendship all these years.
Cheers, Richard. Thank you.
I love you. And guys, remember, as I end every show, I love the quote by Joel Osteen that every day you wake up, you get a choice. You can be a victim or you can be a victor. And if you guys listen to this show, you're no longer victims of your past, but you're victors of your future. I love you guys. Have an amazing week. And remember that vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you guys. Have an amazing day. Isaac, my brother, take care.
Richard, you do the same. Be safe.